Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully, this whole chapter of Zeus versus T1 can come to a close. We have the response from Zeus's agency. Let's just read through it and get to our thoughts. Later on in the video, let's jump into the reading portion, as per usual. All right. Zeus's agency has released their official statement, translated. A statement regarding the transfer of the player Zeus. Hello, this is the play, the agency representing player Zeus. Out of respect, I will not try to pronounce his name because I think that I will butcher it. It's probably a very beautiful name when someone that can say it would say it. I out of respect. We sincerely thank all the fans who have continuously supported Zeus. We also deeply apologize for the concern caused to fans due to the recent issue regarding Zeus's transfer. Recently, Zeus transferred from T1 to Hanwha Life Esports, and fans have been expressing various opinions regarding his transfer. Respecting Zeus's wishes to avoid escalating disputes with his previous team, T1, which had been his close ally. That's kind of interesting phrasing. Our agency initially refrained from making an official statement on this matter. However, as the AMA session announced on the early morning of November 22nd contained factual inaccuracies and other misleading content, the agency decided to investigate the facts by consulting with both Hanwha Life Esports and Choi Woo-jae, I give it a shot, and to issue an official statement. Our intention is to clearly communicate the facts to prevent misunderstandings and damage and to sincerely convey the positions of both Zeus and our agency. We hope that this statement will deliver the truth about Zeus and that it will stop any groundless criticism directed at him. Here is the translation of the table of content. First round of negotiations between T1 and agency held in Gangnam. Initial proposal from T1, proposal under review. So this is the 12th. Second round of direct negotiation between T1 and the agency held in Gangnam. Reassessment. First preliminary negotiation. Second proposal from T1 rejected. Would review based on market value. So basically go into free agency. Second preliminary negotiation rejected. Would review based on market value. Third preliminary negotiation. Third proposal from T1 and direct communication between the player and T1 completed. Rejected. Would review based on market value. So basically T1 is upping their offers because they want to settle the contract before Zeus goes into free agency. 19th, this is day of free agency. 8:30 morning notification to the player about the final terms expected to be delivered during lunch. Proposal made by the agency. Negotiations begin regarding terms of additional clauses. Proposal made by the agency. Delivery of the first counter proposal. Proposal made by T1. Delivery of the final response to the counter proposal. Proposal made by the agency. Rejection of T1's final proposal. Proposal made by the agency. Direct communication between the player and T1 completed. Proposal made by T1. Additional requests and coordination regarding the player's decision-making process. Focus shifted to clarifying terms and extending deadlines. Reassessment and delivery of final proposal based on new terms proposal made by the agency. Inquiry about the final proposal. Proposal made by the agency. Direct communication between the player and T1 completed. Proposal made by T1. Delivery of the final proposal. Proposal made by T1. Delivery of the second counter proposal. Proposal made by the agency. Negotiations concluded due to T1's inability to accept the counter proposal. Final decision made by the agency. So the crucial details here that we notice, right, what they are claiming is that they do give counter offers. They made it clear that they want to, of course, go and see the market value. And there is no mention of any meetings in person being cancelled or any ghosting process because in the end, they make the claim that they always said that they want to see the free agency. And this was a complete, they were rejecting this. And then in the end, they made a decision the same day of free agency. So basically it started at 8 and T1 had a window to discuss things and they gave some proposals. But in the end, they just signed with Hanwha Life because they didn't accept the counter proposal made by the agency. During the priority negotiation period before the 19th, the agency consistently engaged in good faith discussions with T1, even while emphasizing their desire to assess the player's market value in the free agency market. On the 19th, despite entering the free agency market, neither the agency nor Zeus agreed to any direct discussions with T1 before 10 a.m. or after 3 p.m. So they're basically making the claim that there was no agreement about meeting in person. On the 19th, the negotiations with T1 continued constructively without considering overseas transfer. A 3 p.m. deadline was communicated to T1 by request of Hanwha Life Esports. The negotiations ultimately concluded as T1 was unable to meet the terms by 3:30 p.m., leading to a termination of the talks. Position of the agency and Zeus regarding the contract terms. From the beginning of his professional career during the T1 training period, Zeus devoted himself exclusively to T1. He expressed his wish to remain with T1 out of loyalty and affection, even if it meant sacrificing better opportunities elsewhere. This was communicated clearly to the agency. During the 2023 free agency market negotiations, T1 presented contract terms that were unacceptable. The agency supported Zeus in exploring other teams while still leaving the final decision to him. However, Zeus ultimately chose to pursue direct final negotiations with T1, demonstrating his loyalty. Entering the 2024 free agency market, Zeus acknowledged T1's legacy and agreed to negotiate under the condition that he would prioritize the T1 re-signing if the terms were reasonable and matched offers from the other teams. Despite this, T1 made offers that failed to reflect the player's contributions, particularly as a key team member in securing back-to-back World Championship victories. T1 claims that the conditions proposed reflected long-term vision for the player. However, the proposed terms were not objectively advantageous to Zeus, making it difficult for him to agree. The final terms proposed by the agency to T1, including monetary aspects, options, and duration, were not met by T1 in any way. Consequently, Zeus ultimately signed with Hanwha Life Esports under conditions more favorable to him. The belief that Zeus prioritized overseas transfer over T1 due to contract terms is entirely false. So the key thing here, right, is that Joe Marsh made the claim that they were willing to do anything to sign Zeus. And here the agency is making the claim that the offer from T1 was nowhere close to the offer of Hanwha Life, and they made no considerable changes to come closer to that. Negotiations and counteroffers during the priority period. After receiving T1's initial proposal, the agency consistently conveyed its stance that it wanted to evaluate Zeus' market value during the free agency period. T1's proposal cited the team's financial situation and the introduction of a salary cap system, arguing that this could limit the player's value. The agency, prioritizing accurate market evaluation, chose not to make an immediate counteroffer, but rather to confirm Zeus's value in the free agency market before initiating further discussions. The agency's stance was that, instead of making a hasty decision, it would prioritize protecting the player's rights by ensuring contract terms align with the market standards. Despite not making counter-offers, negotiations with T1 were conducted earnestly. Even after the free agency evaluation, Zeus expressed his firm intention to remain with T1 if the terms were competitive. The claim that the agency did not negotiate actively or was simply waiting for other offers is inaccurate. The agency negotiated continuously while also ensuring transparency about the free agency market evaluation process. Negotiations and deadlines on November 19th. The agency did not agree to any direct meetings with T1 before 10 a.m. or after 3 p.m. on November 19th. During the free agency period, the agency consistently communicated its intention to evaluate market offers first before finalizing any agreements. On November 19th, the agency requested the deadline of 3 p.m. to finalize the negotiation process. The agency. And negotiations continued past the 3 p.m. deadline, but no agreement was reached due to T1's inability to accept the proposed terms. It was emphasized that the 3 p.m. deadline was set upon Hanwha Life Esports' request. So, okay, for a moment I thought that they set the deadline, and then here they are confirming again from their side that Hanwha Life made the deadline. So somebody is definitely lying, somebody is definitely lying, because there's a lot of contradictions here that we will get to when we finish reading this. The extended deadline until 3:30 p.m. was also not sufficient to finalize any agreements. Despite the ongoing negotiations, both parties ultimately concluded that no further extensions were possible. Communication after the contract conclusion. After the negotiations ended, the agency reached out to T1 on November 21st to express regret, understanding regarding the situation. This is, I imagine, the apology that Joe Marsh is referring to, that referred to in the EMA, that the agency apologized. The agency refrained from making any additional public statements, instead choosing to handle the matter privately. The agency regrets any misunderstanding caused by accusations suggesting that the situation was their fault. The free agency market operates under time-sensitive conditions, with decisions often needing to be made quickly. The agency emphasized that the decision to move forward was made solely due to market constraints and was not influenced by any personal grudges. The agency clarified that there were no agreements or proposals made regarding contract extensions, even though discussions continued until the deadline. Although there have been misunderstandings and incorrect information, we have prioritized explaining the key aspects of the situation. All our claims are based on verified communication and decisions made between Zeus, How Alive Esports, and our agency. We aim to convey the facts clearly, express our regret for the misunderstandings with T1, and request an end to the negative public discourse and unnecessary controversy around this matter. With this statement, we have fully communicated the agency's position. We earnestly ask fans to respect both the agency and Zeus' stance and to refrain from any groundless criticism or unwarranted backlash. Thank you for the play. Something that I can add is that Joe Marsh also made a tweet that he stands by the things he said in the AMA and will refrain from further commenting on, of course, anything that has been said. But let's clarify the inconsistency, right? Where Joe Marsh has his perspective and the T1 perspective, and then, of course, the perspective of the agency and Zeus' side. So Joe Marsh made the claim and joked multiple times there was no counter proposals, and there was, no counter proposals, and their meetings in person were not met, and they weren't allowed, or things were cancelled in terms of meeting the player in person. It was stated that Becker and the CEO were already on their way to meet Zeus in person, and before they could, they already signed with How Alive. And additionally, Joe Marsh made the claim that he spoke to How Alive, and How Alive confirmed that there was no deadline set. And of course, this states the opposite of that. The 2023 free agency market negotiation is also important because in the end conclusion, I think the conversation was that Coma and owner had to convince Zeus to stick around in the team. And already then, Zeus had expressed some level of intention that he was unhappy with his contract conditions. In regards to other inconsistencies, I guess the main thing is just, both sides are saying that T1, like Zeus, had intentions to stay in T1 if the conditions were right. I think that, if we think about the incentives, right, both sides have an incentive to spin this story in their favor. From T1 side, it's very important that the public knows and thinks and believes that they did everything they could to keep Zeus in the team. It's very, very important for the public image because they don't want to be blamed for losing, this roster, right? ZOFGK. While, of course, from a business standpoint, I think it's really impressive that they managed to keep them together for 3 years. But in terms of course, optics, T1 has every incentive to spin this story in a way where the fans believe that they did everything they could and the agency is at fault here for acting in bad faith and not giving any counter proposals, communicating very poorly, and just stringing them along. It's very important to understand that incentive. The agency, of course, has the incentive to make it clear that Zeus was not at fault, meaning that he wanted to maintain the relationship with T1. For all the fans to see it that way is also important from their standpoint. Even if the world is that Zeus wanted to leave T1, it is good for people to believe that he didn't. Right? From a public optic perspective, it is good for Zeus if people believe that he didn't want to leave T1, even if he did. And now, of course, it's just a question of maintaining a positive view in the lens of course, the public. Additionally here, the agency is kind of crafting this statement in a way where the anger is directed towards the agency. And the same way with how T1 managed their conversation, it is also directed towards the agency. And the truth of it all is that how people view this agency doesn't matter. Because in the aftermath, T1 has the incentive to keep the door open for the future because Zeus is a god tier player in the LCK. They have every incentive to keep the relationship open and then further down the line make a decision, right? To close that door would be a terrible business decision. To hold a grudge would be a terrible business decision. Maybe when ZOFGK, the Zufke roster, is over, maybe Zeus would return to T1, right? We don't know why Zeus wanted to leave with T1. That is a crucial thing that I mentioned in the previous video, is that we don't know, of course, the dynamic of the team. We only see the filtered version, the brand-friendly version of all of the players, right? We see earnest moments on streams and clips, and they're showing their personality, and everything is very open in esports. But all of the drama that is happening internally, the strife and the stress and the pressure, how it comes out in maybe bad ways, which for sure is true. Sit there for a second and think that a roster staying together for this long is not sunshine and rainbows. There were periods where they were underperforming. I'm sure it was giga stressful, giga rough, and they probably have, their own, dynamics within the team that can be very frustrating to deal with. That is why a lot of teams change, and it's a miracle that they stay together for that long. So the reasons why Zeus would want to leave, probably we'll never find out, because all of those things should stay within the team. It is very sacred, If someone is acting in their worst, right, in their worst moment, in a very, very personal environment where everything should be unfiltered, you don't want that to come out because it comes across in a bad way and people will misinterpret it. But these relationships, of course, going through stressful things, relationships take a toll on things. And that's why teams most of the time change. So the reason why Zeus would want to leave, even though, T1 is the org, the big dog, and the publicity and so forth, we will never find out the main reasons, right? So both sides have incentives to lie, to spin the story their way. I think if the version of the agency is true, right? If we just imagine that this is true, then it comes across as if T1 negotiated from a position of arrogance and they leveraged, their position and their standing in the league and were very, very late and their proposals weren't competitive enough. And it just seems that T1 at some point couldn't match the offer of Hanwha Life, even though they made the claim in their own AMA that they would be willing to match anything, which is important for the public to think from their perspective. If the version of course, Joe Marsh and the AMA is true, then it seems like Zeus had every intention to leave T1, and he was stringing them along. The agency was stringing them along to, of course, leverage the T1 offer to get the best possible offer from Hanwha Life, basically acting in bad faith and leveraging T1's need for, of course, Zeus to complete the roster to then get the most competitive offer from Hanwha Life. The key detail here for me is Hanwha Life's position. So, Joe Marsh claimed that he spoke to Hanwha Life, and Hanwha Life said there was no deadline set. The agency claimed that Hanwha Life did indeed, of course, set the deadline, right? Deadline was set upon Hanwha Life Esports request. From Hanwha Life's perspective, if T1 is saying the truth, they have every incentive to not talk about this. Because they're not going to, shed a bad light on, of course, their newly acquired player. And on the other side, too, Hanwha Life to get into the fray and make a clarification that they made the deadline, they would be under so much scrutiny, too, in regards to, of course, T1 being very angry, like the fans being very angry that they are the ones that broke up the roster. Although that, of course, is very unreasonable and they just maintained a sense of competition, of course, the passion and the influence of the massive T1 fan base can definitely be damaging. Of course, it wouldn't be rational, but, you know, this level of emotion comes with a lot of irrationality. The thing that is confusing to me, right, is if you just think about this from Zeus's position in this offseason, he has an insane amount of leverage. If T1 sign 4 players and they're good to go and Zeus is the final piece, that part is massive leverage because he knows then he's the final piece, he's the final leg in the Exodia that is going to win, you know, the marketing game. And T1 need him. They need him for market purposes, merch purposes, to keep the roster together. They need him to continue this massive legacy story that is sending tremors across all of esports. Additionally, the second big piece of leverage is that Zeus is the most attractive top laner in the free market, of course, of the LCK player pool. And that, of course, is a massive bonus too. Doran, Kingen are the 2 players that come after Keen and Zeus on the list. So the main thing, the reason I talk about Zeus's leverage, it just seems so strange that How Alive, if there was a world where an artificial deadline was set, I think that that is completely troll from the agency. You have all of the leverage, you know, all of the leverage. I tell you this, right? I refer back to the reckless signing with G2, choosing over Fnatic and G2. Both sides tried to set deadlines, but those deadlines were bullshit. Both of these teams want Zeus, need Zeus, want Zeus. They're going to wait. They're going to compete and they're going to race until they are out of resources. An artificial deadline makes no sense to me because from an agency perspective, you want to play How Alive against T1 to get the favorable offer in, of course, a competitive market for Zeus. If How Alive set the deadline, what is the deadline? It's like, oh, we're going to sign with Doran unless you sign by 3 p.m. It just doesn't sound rational at all to me. It really, really doesn't sound rational. I don't know if it's true or not, because obviously in that position, if How Alive then say, we're going to sign with Doran by 3 p.m. unless you accept this offer, then obviously if that news comes out, then the offer from T1 will be significantly, but they'll be in a position where it can be significantly less because Zeus no longer has option. So it comes with a little bit of stress, right? That's why a lot of things are moving pieces in the market. I mentioned that T1's position came with a sense of arrogance. I think another crucial detail that was mentioned before is that we talked about how there was some kind of a verbal agreement. It has been no mention from Joe Marsh or this post here from the agency that the verbal agreement was in place for, of course, Zeus. So that is super, super important. Nobody went back on their word or something. I think that's super, super crucial because that part was, of course, the worst one. If there was a verbal agreement in place and someone just reneged it would be super, super bad because I had concerns for the other players, right? If that verbal agreement was leveraged to make, of course, the other players signed, then it would have been terrible if that was the case, but that is not the case here. I think from T1 side, if this is true, I repeat again, then there does seem to be a sense of arrogance and an assumption that they would be able to sign Zeus, and in the end they couldn't. And I think that the moment you're in that position as T1 and there is a chance that Zeus is looking to explore options, I do think that you still need to explore the option of Keen real time. I understand that they wanted to maintain the purity of the story, that they just signed their players and it was very clean and they never had the intentions of anything else. But they did get caught with their pants down. And I think blaming anybody else for that is a bad thing. You know, I think that's a bad thing. Because they could have definitely reached out to Keen's agency and inquire about his state and made it clear. It's like, we are looking to actively sign Zeus, but he's going to explore his free agency. And if you have interest, maybe there's going to be an opportunity for you over at T1. Like, that's definitely like an angle, right? What else? I think, the big point is still just that deadline. I said everything that I wanted to say in regards to the deadline, right? How my life could come out and clarify this, but there is also, definitely an incentive here to not say anything at all. And I did read comments about people expecting legal action. No, there is no legal action to be had here. What kind of legal action can be done here? Nothing at all. There's nothing illegal here. It's just a negotiation, and that's it. I think if there was like a verbal agreement that was broken, or like slanderous statements being made, I think sure, but it's not really. People are just giving their account of a story, and I'm sure that both parties are spinning it in their favor. I'm sure of it. But the leverage thing that I mentioned, that is the weird one. That is the weird one. And, I think from the standpoint of T1, the only thing that makes sense here is, if you want to look at it from the Zeus agency position, is that T1 just couldn't match the offer. They just couldn't match the offer. And the counter proposal was so far away from the How Alive offer that they just moved on and didn't risk How Alive moving to a different position. I think that's what it seems like. And that is also, the counter to what Joe Marsh said, them being willing to, of course, do anything they can to re-sign Zeus, because here the agency is making it from their perspective, clear that they didn't. Okay. I think that's the end of the saga, really. I think that I covered it all. I'm trying to think if there's something else to add. I think that it's important to be careful about, assuming things here, because everyone here has an incentive to spin the story in their favor and the narrative in this favor. And it's a lot easier to do so from T1's perspective, because they have the momentum of the fan base. So I implore you to look at it as objectively as possible. If you want my opinion still is that I don't think that Zeus wanted to stay in T1. That's what it seems like to me, really. It just seems like Zeus didn't want to stay in T1, and it seemed like, he wanted to move on. And it seems like T1 couldn't compete offer-wise with the offer that How Alive put on the table. And I think for the future, both Zeus and T1 want to keep their hands clean in regards to their own personal embrace and them, because maybe there's a future where they work together again, right? An example here, right, is, let's say, Fnatic and Upset, right? It's rumored that they're going to reunite. It's like the ending wasn't the greatest, right? It's like Upset was on the bench and then moved from a different team, and he didn't play on the roster and didn't play on the team. But now both are in a position where Upset wants to be on a competitive roster, wants to join Fnatic, wants to play with Mickey, and Fnatic wants an S tier AD carry in the region, right? So you're just looking at it for what it is, and you move on, and you do business. You don't hold grudges. Later down the line, maybe the best offers Zeus is gonna get is from T1, and maybe T1 want to work with a great damn top laner. All this emotional thing in between, there's no reason to close doors or shut doors. It's very clear here in both sides of the communication that Zeus is being clear that he could join T1 in the future and Zeus would be welcome back to T1. And the conclusion in the end is that T1 want to make it seem, and maybe it's true, of course, that they did everything they could to sign Zeus, but in the end, Zeus chose to go elsewhere. And Zeus wants to make it seem that he wanted to stay with T1, but the offer was not competitive enough. Tell me, what do you think? The saga concludes. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We are going to continue with the coverage of the news, of course, that is happening globally before the game start. Let me know what you think about this new content, unedited, fresh, and just straight from the mind of the canon. Please subscribe and like the video if you enjoyed it. If you made it this far, bless you and bless your face. Catch you on the flip flop. Peace.